The sister of influencer Noah Beck was a teacher. Now police say she may have crossed a line into criminal territory. They are investigating allegations of a sex crime involving a former student. Interviews, text messages, and a letter police say she wrote to a student. What's inside? You're not going to believe it. Welcome to Crime Fix. I'm Anjanette Levy. Noah Beck has a lot going on in his professional life. A Baywatch reboot will premiere in the fall. He's coming off of the premiere of a movie on Tubi, Sideline 2, last December. And of course, he has millions and millions of followers on social media. But his family members, they've been going through some things over the last several months that aren't great. I told you about his mom, Amy Beck, being placed on paid administrative leave from her job as a second-grade teacher in Peoria, Arizona, after a video resurfaced of her performing a simulated sex act on Noah. That video first appeared in 2020 on his TikTok account. Amy Beck is not under criminal investigation and has not been charged with a crime. I want to be clear about that. But right now, the prosecutor's office in Maricopa County, Arizona, is considering whether to file a pandering charge against Noah's older sister, Haley Beck. That investigation started in July of 2025. The investigation started after someone reported that another teacher named Angela Berlacca was luring football players from Centennial High School to her home by sending them naked videos on Snapchat. That's part one of this investigation. But then the name Haley Beck began to surface in the probe. Haley is the older sister of Noah Beck and also a teacher at Centennial High School, or at least she was. In a 176-page police report, Peoria police detectives write about how there was talk from students that a video was circulating that showed Haley Beck performing oral sex on a former male student. In August 2025, a detective interviewed an 11th grade student with the permission of her parents. The report states, regarding Miss Beck, the student was told by her older sister that she is friendly with the football boys, especially a student whose name is redacted. She specifically noted incidents where Miss Beck would be teaching her class, and suddenly when the football players came in, Miss Beck would stop teaching to talk to them. Detectives interviewed another student. In the report, the detective wrote, the student, whose name is redacted, graduated from high school 2 months ago. She attended high school all 4 years. The student knows Miss Beck has a weird focus on guys. The student had her as a teacher last year. She described the classroom environment as annoying due to her prioritizing the male students' attention. Miss Beck would let students in her classroom when they weren't supposed to be in there. One time, the student asked Miss Beck if she could stay in her classroom for a period. Miss Beck told her no because the class was busy. The student heard from one of her friends that was also in Miss Beck's class that once another student left, members of the football team came into the classroom. Miss Beck allowed them to stay in the classroom for the remainder of the period. The interview with this former female student continued as she offered more recollections. The report states, the student has heard rumors that during Christmas time she gave a student whose name is redacted a Christmas gift. In addition to this, she heard Miss Beck made a TikTok in a male student's vehicle. The male students' names are redacted. The former female student thought this was weird because as a teacher, this is a boundary she shouldn't cross. The former female student also heard a male student and Miss Beck would Snapchat each other. The male student would come into her classroom and hang out with Miss Beck, even though he was not a student in her class. The former student is not sure who started these rumors or who told her this information. The former student has never personally observed any of these allegations. The female student told another person she heard this information from another student's girlfriend. In addition to this rumor about Miss Berlacca, the student also heard a rumor about another teacher named Haley Beck. The student heard stuff has been going on between she and a male student for a while. Specifically, she heard about a video going around that shows Haley Beck engaged in oral sex with the male student whose name is redacted. In addition to this, it is known Haley will go to the marijuana dispensary for the male student. The female student heard this information from a male student whose name is redacted. That student, whose name is redacted, told this information to the female student a week before school started. The female student said she had not seen the video. However, a former student whose name is redacted had seen the video of the male student engaged in oral sex with a person whose name is redacted. During the summer, the student saw Haley Beck had invited multiple students to her apartment complex to go swimming. Detectives write about interviewing the grandmother of a male student who later moved to California. The report states the grandmother told police that her grandson, who was by then 18 years old, told her that two unidentified female teachers had been sending him messages, nude videos, and giving him money. This behavior, according to the report, started when the student was 16. The student would not cooperate with the investigation, but indicated two other students were involved, according to this police report. The student's grandmother said there was concern that her grandson's academic scholarship would be jeopardized if he cooperated with the investigation. The officers wrote in the report that a naked video the grandmother showed to them was Angela Berlocca in a shower. Officers also said they searched Haley Beck's apartment and they found a letter that she had written. The letter states, "I know you are nostalgic AF, so I hope you look back at our time as a good one. 12 and no, this isn't me like saying goodbye, but I know things will be different. But don't forget our first pickleball hangout, plus how you wouldn't get out of my car for like 3 hours, or our Sonic run after your state game, or all the random times you, quote, fell asleep on my couch just waiting for me to invite you into my room, LOL. Ooh, or our go-kart experience, plus our word games at Shake Shack. You know, for this relationship being extremely wrong, I feel like we have really made the most out of it. I'm glad I got to come to your tattoo appointments, even if you just wanted me to bring you food. All of our car hangouts were fun, too, for eating plus other stuff, LOL. Of course, detectives interviewed Haley Beck. The report states, I told Haley it had been brought up during the investigation there was a video of Haley performing oral sex on the student, and I asked if that was true. Haley adamantly denied and said absolutely not. That is one thing I would 1,000% deny. She said it is insane that would be alleged. I then asked Haley if there ever was a sexual relationship with the student before and after he turned 18. She said no. Haley was adamant the student has never come to her apartment and she has never had a relationship outside of a student-teacher relationship. The detectives also wrote about payments and messages they said they recovered between Haley Beck and the student. An officer wrote in the report, in this series of messages, Haley is going to a concert and tells the student she will give him $5 per compliment for a photo of her outfit she is wearing. Haley sends the photo of herself to the student and he provides his feedback. Haley sends $25 via Apple Pay to the student. She then suggests a sleepover in Anthem, where the student is going to be in a football camp. Haley also sends a photo of alcoholic beverages. In the end, the officer said Haley Beck paid this student $630 over a month and a half, and that their relationship was a sugar mama / sugar baby type of thing, and that these exchanges happened after the student had turned 18. In one instance, the officer said that Beck wrote to the 18-year-old boy with a payment. This money exchange just felt like straight prostitution. The Maricopa County attorney is now reviewing the case for a possible criminal charge of pandering. This is after prosecutors sent the case back to police for further investigation. Beck's attorney, Matthew Long, issued a statement to 12 News in Arizona that said Ms. Beck respects the criminal justice process and looks forward to the conclusion of the investigation, which will reveal she committed no crimes. Like any individual subject to investigation, Ms. Beck is entitled to due process. We are confident that a complete review of the facts will confirm her innocence. Earlier this week, the superintendent of the Peoria Unified School District sent a letter to parents who are undoubtedly concerned. Dr. K.C. Summers wrote in part, While this matter directly involves Centennial High School, I know this matter has reached the attention of our broader community. Student safety is the foundation of everything we do at Peoria Unified. It is the standard I am held to, the standard I hold our principals and staff to, and the standard you should expect every time you send your child to one of our schools. With that as the starting point, here is what is established and what is happening now. The facts. The Peoria Police Department investigated this matter and on April 2nd, 2026, communicated in writing that there is no indication district officials failed to meet their obligations as mandatory reporters under Arizona law. Their conclusion was that the information available at the time concerns were initially raised did not meet the legal threshold for reasonable suspicion of abuse. When information later developed that met that threshold, law enforcement was notified and the investigation proceeded. The police department has submitted its findings to the Maricopa County Attorney's Office for review. The superintendent wrote that many rumors have circulated online. Dr. Summers said the district's Title IX process found that Haley Beck violated the governing board policy on sexual harassment, and Angela Berlacca voluntarily surrendered her teaching certificate back in January of 2026. Haley Beck's certificate is under investigation by the state's Board of Education. So I'd like to bring in Josh Kalsrud. He is a criminal defense attorney who practices in Maricopa County. Josh, thank you so much for coming on.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Josh, are you surprised by the amount of attention that this case involving both Haley Beck and Angela Berlacca, the amount of attention it's getting? I mean, we're talking about it. The press out in Arizona is talking about it. It's all over TikTok.
Well, there are a lot of components here that make this kind of, a popular case. Number one, Ms. Beck in this case is related to a popular influencer, but it's always surprising when you have a teacher who is accused, a female teacher who's accused of committing some sort of sexual conduct with a student. And even more when, the teacher is somewhat attractive and, you have this dilemma where this stereotype where, men kind of think, well, maybe, this isn't as bad as it seems. But then you have the law side that say, absolutely, this is horrible. And so you have a debate about what's moral and immoral. And then you have the issues in this case, the legal issues that makes this even more difficult to prosecute. So there's a lot to discuss here.
Mm-hmm. There really is a lot to unpack. And I mean, this is a 200-page police report. This investigation started in July of 2025, July 30th, really, to be exact. And the cops get this report in Peoria about these teachers and that there's something going on. There might be a video floating around involving Angela Berlacca and her doing some things in the shower, and it's floating around. It went to somebody, and then there's some talk that comes up about Haley Beck, the sister of Noah Beck, the influencer, and he's going to be on this new Baywatch show and everything. And there's this talk about how she was allegedly, in a sexual relationship with this football player who had since moved to California. So, I mean, they went and investigated both of these teachers. They took photographs of Angela Berlacca. They did a search warrant and got photographs of her. They looked at her social media profile. They interviewed both women. And, Haley said, "This is insane. I would never do that." But, she's not going, I don't think she's going to come out and say, yeah, I did it. I mean, nobody who's got criminal liability, I think, is going to come out and say, yeah, I had sex with a former student.
Exactly. And, one of the things that's remarkable is the length of time that this alleged relationship took place. I mean, if reports are correct, the grooming began when the victim was just a sophomore in high school. And the fact that it lasted through the time that he graduated is remarkable. And, it creates a lot of challenges for the police department because all they have right now are the text messages and a video or two. And in Arizona, you need more than just statements or a confession to be able to prosecute somebody. So, what would constitute corroboration in a case like this? Well, certainly the payment. If that $630 payment was recorded and actually did happen, that should be pretty easy to find and could support a pandering charge if the victim was over 18. The problem is you don't have a cooperating victim. Allegedly, according to reports, it could jeopardize his scholarship or his athletics in college, because if this teacher, Ms. Beck, was inflating his grades, then he may become ineligible, because it affects why he was accepted for athletics at the college he's at.
Wow. And that could be a scandal of its own if that is indeed the case.
Oh, absolutely. And, here, what we have is the Maricopa County Attorney's Office that really wants to get this case right. What they are doing now, and the reason why they've sent the case back a couple times, is to create really a granular timeline of what happened, when it happened, and where it happened. And the reason why is because, the facts of the case occurred just on the cusp of what society deems to be a minor or not a minor. And because once you turn 18, the stakes change. And what would be a felony with mandatory prison becomes maybe a misdemeanor, if that. Now, again, there's a possible pandering charge, which is when you create an environment and promote a house of prostitution. In this case, it would be encouraging the victim to be a prostitute, to accept $630 for a sexual act would certainly qualify. But again, you need a cooperating victim, I think, to have a reasonable likelihood of conviction, which is the standard that Maricopa County uses when determining whether or not to charge a criminal case.
I was kind of wondering why they sent it back. I mean, I didn't know if that showed they were concerned that there were serious flaws in the case. I understand, like, they probably were like, okay, we need more I's dotted, more T's crossed, or we want a little more meat on the bone. But does that show that they're concerned that there's just not enough there?
Absolutely. So when I was a prosecutor, I literally charged thousands of cases. And there are three things you can do when you receive what's called a submittal. That's a police department submitting charges. You can either dismiss it because it just lacks probable cause, or that there's not a reasonable likelihood of conviction, or you can accept it, where you charge the case, or you can do what Maricopa County did, which is furthering the case, saying that, look, we're not dismissing it, but we need additional evidence because we, the prosecutors, believe that there's not a reasonable likelihood of conviction at this time. So if I'm the prosecutor on this case, what I want is corroboration that a sexual act occurred on hopefully a specific date, or at least a date range in Maricopa County. Whether, it has to be some type of sexual contact. And, if I'm going to charge it, really, it has to have occurred when the victim was under 18, especially if the victim is not cooperating. Now, just because a victim isn't cooperating doesn't mean that a prosecutor can't charge the case. So
Sure.
in this case, the victim did make what sounds like incriminatory statements to his mother about Ms. Beck. And the prosecution could always subpoena the victim and the victim's mother to testify, and use the victim's mother to impeach the victim in this case if they have to. But juries don't like that. And the juries, when they see a victim who doesn't care, often don't care themselves. It's hard to make a jury care when a victim doesn't care about the case. So there are a lot of issues that need to be ironed out. But for the prosecutor, they need a specific date, time, and location for a sexual act.
The interesting thing that you and I were talking about was Haley's one message that the police say she sent to this kid, this former student, where she says something like, "This feels like straight up prostitution," because she's sending him a payment. And that, to me, it's like, it's not prostitution unless there's some sex going on. So I mean, that to me seems very damning. But that's just one piece of the puzzle. And that's probably, in a prosecutor's eyes, not enough.
Yeah, and on the other side of the coin, she does refer to herself as a quote-unquote sugar mama.
Right.
In traditional quote-unquote sugar baby, sugar mama relationships, it's not always sexual. It can be just gratuitous, where you're spoiling the sugar baby from the sugar mama's standpoint. So it's because it's not always sexual. A defense would likely say that she was referring to her status as a sugar mama, and that it wasn't necessarily for sexual conduct. It was a poor use of words. But that's not how the police look at this. For the police, when she says the word prostitution, that means intent, that she intended a payment for a sexual act. And so what prosecutors want to find out is, was there a sexual act in or around the time that alleged payment occurred? Because if there was, they could have a strong case, either for pandering or sexual conduct, depending on the age of the victim at the time that it occurred.
Yeah, and she's getting something. It's transactional, obviously. And so I'm sure her attorney would say, poor choice of words, but she's getting something out of it. I mean, it's a transaction, whether she's getting some type of attention out of it, whether it's the compliments or the attention or what have you. I want to read a little bit of her letter. They found this letter in her apartment when they did the search warrant. This is in the police report. And she says, "I know you are nostalgic AF. We all know what that means. So I hope you look back at our time as a good one, 12 and no. This isn't me like saying goodbye, but I know things will be different. But don't forget our first pickleball hangout. Plus, how you wouldn't get out of my car for like 3 hours. Or our Sonic run after your state game, or all the random times you, quote, fell asleep on my couch just waiting for me to invite you into my room, LOL. Ooh, or our go-kart experience plus our word games at Shake Shack." So the whole, like, you fell asleep and on my couch and you wanted to be invited into my room. I mean, come on. Like, we know something was going on. You don't just invite a kid into your room who plays football at the high school. Wow.
This is great circumstantial evidence for the prosecutors to prove intent. That is a very salacious letter, to say the least. And what prosecutors want is for investigators to look into every single act that she described in there. And what they may want to do is get the victim's cell phone records and see where he was really during the entire time of their relationship, to see if the cell tower pings were at or near the Miss Beck's house and location, and then try to put together an accurate timeline of when things could have occurred. They also want to, pressure the victim to describe exactly what these acts are. Like 3 hours in her vehicle. What does that mean? Tell us. Sleeping on the couch and waiting for her to come out. What does that mean? Like, is she, is this some sort of fantasy, or is she talking about a specific act? They need to get to the bottom of this. And I can see why this has taken a long time, because, again, you don't have a cooperating victim. And, I think the cell phone tower records would really aid in this case. It's corroborative in nature. That means it supports their theory of the case, especially if they could put the victim at or near Ms. Beck's home when a lot of these allegations were happening.
It's really something. So her attorney, Matthew Long, told 12 News out there in Arizona that he's confident she'll be, that there's not going to be charges. She's innocent, all of this stuff. You're a criminal defense attorney, Josh. You evaluate cases for a living. You defend people. Do you think she's going to be charged? Haley Beck.
You know, I'm on the fence on this one, only because of the uncooperating victim. I think that if the victim gives any indication that he's willing to cooperate or is willing to testify if subpoenaed, then I would charge it. However, without victim cooperation and without solid evidence that sexual acts occurred when the victim was under 18, I would say no charges would be brought. However, I'll tell you, the Maricopa County Attorney's Office is very aggressive with their charging when a sexual act occurred when the victim's under 18, regardless of whether or not the victim wants to prosecute. So if they can really put together a granular and solid timeline of events, and let's say that there's some solid evidence that sexual conduct occurred other than just the statements that you talked about, then I think there'll be charges.
Wow. And how about Angela Berlocca?
Yeah, that's a completely different situation where, well, not completely different, but you have that's another weird wrinkle in this case, right? I mean, you have two teachers who are vying for the attention of a student, and I don't know as much about what text messages or evidence they have against her, only that she is being looked into as a suspect as well, and apparently the two teachers were aware of each other as well during the time this was happening. And it's not clear whether or not they were sharing stories with each other or whether or not they were rivals over the same student. It's a very bizarre situation. It's the first time I've ever heard a situation where you have two different teachers grooming and committing allegedly misconduct with a minor. It boggles the mind how this could happen for so long, especially in this case.
Right, with the same school district. I mean, what a nightmare. But really, the main concern needs to be the safety of the students, the kids at the school.
Absolutely.
Josh Kalsrud, thank you so much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Again, the Maricopa County Attorney's Office is reviewing the cases against both Haley Beck and Angela Berlocca. No charges have been filed at the time of this recording. And that's it for this episode of Crime Fix. I'm Jeanette Levy. Thanks so much for being with me. I'll see you back here next time.